It's 7 a.m. You're holding a coffee mug, the same one you've held 1,000 mornings before. Your fingers close around the handle exactly the way they always have. And then, for no reason you can name, it slips. Not from being tired, not from being distracted. It just goes. You catch it half empty against your shirt and stand there a second, looking at your own hand like it belongs to someone else. It's not the first time lately. Last week it was your phone sliding off the arm of the couch. The week before, your keys hitting the floor before you'd even registered that your hand had let go. It's not failure. It's not carelessness. But it started happening more, quietly, almost like your hands have begun keeping something from you. Here's what's strange. This isn't random, and it isn't about being careless. It's a measurable shift inside your body. One, researchers have spent decades quietly documenting down to the gram of force, using instruments built specifically to detect it, and almost no one has explained clearly what that shift actually is. Underneath what feels like clumsiness is a chain of changes in your muscles, in your nerves, and in one hormone that touches almost everything about how your hands work. Most people never connect that hormone to their hands at all. In the next few minutes, we're going to trace that chain link by link. We'll start with your grip and the specific decade where it quietly begins to change. Then we'll go inside the muscle itself to something most people have never heard of that explains why a slipping glass is so hard to catch in time. And right when it looks like this story is only about muscle and nerves, it isn't. There's one more piece, the one almost nobody mentions. Once you hear it, you'll probably never think about your hands quite the same way again. Somewhere between your mid-30s and early 40s, your grip strength peaks. You probably never noticed the moment. There wasn't one. But from there, it begins a slow decline. And in women, that decline tends to start earlier and move faster than most people expect. Researchers measure this with a hand dynamometer, a small device that calculates in kilograms of force exactly how hard your hand can squeeze. Study after study finds the same pattern. Women start with lower peak grip than men, on average, and lose it more quickly through their 40s, 50s, and beyond. In daily life, this looks like a coffee mug slipping mid-pour, a water bottle cap that suddenly fights back, a phone that doesn't sit quite as securely in your palm while you're walking and texting at once. Your grip isn't gone. It's just a little less dependable than it used to be. But here's what doesn't add up yet. Grip strength alone doesn't explain why it's the small things, earrings, pills, a single key, that slip through your fingers most easily. That's a separate problem, and it starts somewhere your strength has nothing to do with. Quick pause, because if this is the first piece of your biology that surprised you tonight, it probably won't be the last. The Science of Aging After 40 by Dr. Adrian Kane is built for exactly this moment, when one symptom makes you realize there's a bigger system underneath it. It walks through what's happening to your hormones, muscles, nerves, sleep, and brain in midlife, all in one place. So a moment like this stops feeling random and starts feeling like part of a pattern you can actually understand. It's linked below. Now, back to your hands, because grip strength was never the whole story. Grip strength is about brute force, how hard your hand can squeeze. But picking up a single earring or holding a pen steady through one sentence takes something else entirely: fine motor control, the ability to produce tiny, exact amounts of force and adjust them instantly. Researchers who study this find that it changes measurably with age, even in hands that are otherwise completely healthy. Small, careful movements become less consistent. The signal between brain and fingertip arrives with more variability than it once did. And small objects, pills, makeup applicators, the back of an earring, start to slip through fingers that used to manage them without a second thought. This isn't weakness, it's imprecision. And imprecision with something small enough to fit in your palm looks exactly like clumsiness. But here's the part that doesn't make sense yet. This kind of slip, where your hand simply doesn't correct in time, has very little to do with how strong your hand is. It has to do with how fast your body can respond once something starts to go wrong. And that response is breaking down in a very specific place. With age comes a process called sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle mass. Your hands and forearms aren't exempt from it, but there's a second, lesser-known process running alongside it: dynapenia, the loss of strength that happens even in muscle that hasn't visibly shrunk at all. Inside that muscle, something more specific is happening. Fast-twitch fibers, the ones responsible for quick, corrective grip adjustments, the kind that catch a glass the instant it starts to tip, are the first to decline, which means your hand can still hold an object. What it loses is the ability to correct its hold quickly enough when something begins to shift. But muscle is only half of that correction. The other half is a signal, one that has to travel from your fingertips to your brain and back fast enough to matter. And that signal is slowing down in a way most people have never heard of. Nerve conduction velocity, the speed at which signals travel along your nerves, slows with age. It's one of the most consistently measured changes in the aging body. In the hand, it means that when a glass begins to tip in your grip, the message that something is wrong takes slightly longer to arrive than it once did. Slightly longer is enough. There's a second layer to this, quieter still. The skin of your hand is lined with specialized touch receptors, nerve endings built to detect pressure, texture, and the very first hint that something is slipping. Their numbers decline with age. The Cleveland Clinic has noted that fewer of these nerve endings means reduced sensation in the hands, and that this directly contributes to dropping things. You're holding the same objects you've always held. You're just receiving less information about them and receiving it more slowly. So, weaker correction, slower signals, less sensation. Three separate systems, all quietly losing precision at once. And none of it, not one piece, is actually where this story begins. Before we get to where this actually begins, it's worth saying, none of what we've covered, the grip, the muscle, the nerves, exists in isolation. These systems don't change on their own. They change inside a much larger shift happening throughout a woman's body in midlife. That's the territory the science of aging after 40 maps in full. Not just the hands, but the hormones, the sleep, the brain, and the muscle changes connected underneath the surface. If today's symptom has you wondering what else is shifting quietly in the background, that's where those questions get answered, linked below. Now, here's the piece that changes how everything we've just covered should be understood. Here's a question almost no one asks. What does the transition out of your reproductive years have to do with your grip on a coffee mug? More than you'd think. In perimenopause, the transition that, for many women, begins in the mid to late 40s, estrogen levels begin a steep decline. Most people know estrogen as a reproductive hormone. Far fewer know it has direct effects on muscle contraction, nerve coordination, and the speed of fine finger movement. NIH research found that fine motor speed, the precision and quickness of small finger movements, drops measurably in the first year after menopause, and that the drop correlates with falling estradiol levels. Postmenopausal women show measurably weaker grip and poorer hand function than premenopausal women of the same age. Even the cerebellum, the part of your brain responsible for coordination and movement timing, is lined with estrogen receptors. When estrogen falls, the fine-tuning of how your brain controls hand movement quietly shifts along with it, and estrogen's anti-inflammatory effect on your joints fades at the same time. Hand osteoarthritis rises sharply after menopause. Carpal tunnel syndrome, compression of the nerve at the wrist that causes numbness and weakness in the thumb and first two fingers, becomes significantly more common during and after the menopausal transition. The grip, the muscle, the nerves. All of it traces back to a hormone most women have only ever associated with periods and hot flashes, never with their hands. None of this shows up in a research paper, but it might be the most familiar part of the story. It's the half-second pause before you pick up a full glass because some quiet part of you isn't sure anymore. It's setting something down a little too carefully, hoping no one notices you did it on purpose. It's dropping something in front of someone you love and laughing it off, while a small, private part of you wonders if this is just how it starts. Your hands have never asked for your attention before. They've simply worked, holding what mattered, doing 100 unnamed small things, all without a single conscious thought. When that quietly stops being true, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like a small erosion of certainty in something you never thought to doubt. That's worth naming, not to feel worse, but because understanding what's actually happening changes the experience of it. This isn't failure, it's physiology. And physiology, once you understand it, is something you can work with. Because the research doesn't end at decline. Targeted strength and dexterity exercises measurably improve hand function even later in life. Conditions like carpal tunnel, when treated, can reverse what feels permanent. And women who stay physically active through midlife show a significantly slower decline than those who don't. This isn't the end of the story. It's the point where it becomes yours to shape. If this video gave you the why behind what your hands have been doing, the science of aging after 40 is where you'll find the what's next, the hormone context, the strength work, the full picture of midlife biology mapped out so you're working with your body instead of guessing at it. It's linked below whenever this is the chapter you're ready to read. Before you go, I want to ask you something specific. Think back to the first time your hands felt different, not the idea of it, the actual moment. What were you holding? Where were you standing? And do you remember what went through your mind right after it happened? Tell me in the comments. The object, the place, the thought. This is one of those things that happens quietly, almost privately, and hardly anyone says out out loud. You might be surprised how many people are already in that conversation, just waiting for someone to start it.